Welcome to Therapy in the Great Outdoors, the podcast where we explore the business and practice of nature-based pediatric therapy of all kinds. If you're an outdoor-loving pediatric practitioner in the fields of occupational, physical, or speech therapy, social work, or mental health, this podcast will help you start and grow a successful nature-based practice or program. I am the ever honest, always 100% real, you'll hear it all on this podcast, Dr. Laura Park Figueroa. I'm a pediatric OT with over 20 years of experience, and I run a thriving nature-based practice with profitable locations in 2 different states and multi-six figures in revenue. I also host the free online community at therapyinthegreatoutdoors.com to help you pursue your nature-based therapy dreams too. Are you ready to take action on those dreams? Let's jump in. Hello, welcome to episode 65 of Therapy in the Great Outdoors. I'm Laura Park Figueroa, and today we have a really wonderful episode with a super savvy nature-based business owner. Shannon Rolph from Ontario, Canada is here, and she is going to talk with us about growing her nature-based practice. You might notice if you've listened to previous episodes that a lot of these live business coaching calls that I do with all of you revolve around this idea of when you hit the point where you need to hire people or your business cannot grow. You may have heard me say this before, that I think a lot of us start out just as an individual in our nature-based practice, and we become surprised at how quickly the practice grows and we have a wait list, and then we need to think about hiring. It is actually a really bad thing for your business. It can be a bad thing if your business has too long of a wait list with people waiting on wait lists for too long. It can actually give your business like a bad feeling in the community that people have been on a wait list for way too long to get in, right? So you want to be able to keep up with the demand in your practice. In this episode, Shannon talks about wanting to be a really good leader for the team that she is developing in her practice. We talk about how to establish policies and procedures up front with your employees while also maintaining your autonomy as the business owner to make changes in the future if needed. We also discuss strategies for establishing financial incentives for your employees, ways to foster team community in alignment with the business priorities and goals, as well as why it is important for all nature-based business owners to have other nature-based business owner friends. So you might notice that a lot of these things are things that I have mentioned before, or are things that if you are running a nature-based business, you might feel the need for these things, right? You might feel the need for, oh my gosh, I need to learn how to do these things, because these are problems that all of us have when we are starting to grow our practices. If that is you, if you are feeling that, oh my gosh, I really need these things type of feeling, then you need to consider joining us inside of the Business Hive. The Business Hive is my 6-month group coaching program that I run for nature-based business owners. You have the option to stay in as long as you want after those 6 months. And in the program, I take people through my Business Bedrocks curriculum, which helps you to set up systems in your nature-based business so that your business is as automated as possible, so that you as the owner can work less and pay yourself more as the business grows. I have done this. I feel like just now I am reaping the benefits of the years of hard work I have put into developing all these systems and a great team in my business in order to have time freedom, money freedom, and flexibility in my schedule. This is what all of us want, right? We want a job that is meaningful, that we really feel the meaning in and the value behind, and that we're doing good in the world as therapists. Yet also we want to be able to live our lives, to have a balanced life where we have time for our family members, our friends, activities we want to do. We have time to take care of our health. All of the things that make a life rich and meaningful are not work. Like a lot of those things, if you have time and money freedom that is given to you by your business, if you establish these systems early on, then you can have that life in a few years. So I'm not going to lie, starting a nature-based practice, starting any business really, is a grind. It is hard. There are lots of things that you have to do when you are starting your business. But inside the business hive, we have that community of people who can support you, who support one another. And you have me helping guide you from all of my years of experience to help you, one, get here so much faster than I did. I'm in year 9 of running my business right now. And also to just save a lot of time and energy and money along the way. So if you're interested, if it sounds like something you might want to invest in for your business, you can go to therapyinthegreatoutdoors.com/hive, HIVE, like busy bees working together in a hive, and get all the info there and join the waitlist. I will be opening enrollment at the end of May, so in just a week or two from the time this will be published, for a cohort to run from June till December. Okay, now that the announcement is over about the hive, let's dive in to this live coaching call for Shannon Rolph. Welcome, everyone, back to another episode of Therapy in the Great Outdoors. Today, I'm so excited because I feel like she's a friend, but we've actually never met in person because we've communicated on Instagram over the years. But now it's nice to see your face, Shannon, in live view instead of like a tiny circle on Instagram. So
Totally.
Shannon Rolph is here, and she's an OT and a psychotherapist. So I want her to talk to us about how the progression of her career has gone. And she's been running a private practice since 2019 and started doing nature-based work in 2021. And we're going to talk a little bit about the questions you have around growing the business. So let's start off, though, by saying welcome. Thanks for being here. And also tell everyone a little about yourself and your business, where you're at right now.
Sounds great. Thanks for having me. I'm really excited to be here. Yeah. So my name's Shannon. I am an OT in Guelph, Ontario, Canada. I started my private practice in 2019 as just like a really off the side of my desk as I was working 2 other jobs. And then it really quickly bloomed into this thing that could be just my full-time role. And then the nature-based piece of my practice really started after the pandemic, mid-pandemic, actually. And so that was this really cool, it was like stumbling into this thing as a result of our family just trying to get through and recognizing how much better life was outside. And thinking if it's better with my own kids outside, then certainly with my OT kids, also it's going to be better outside. And so it started as just one group and then it's grown from there. Yeah. So that's my practice in a small nutshell.
Tell me about were you a psychotherapist before you became an OT, or did you go back to do that? Kind of what was your path there? Because I love this. I think it's really cool when people have training in 2 different fields. I actually wish in retrospect I had done a PhD in a different field, honestly. Like I love OT, of course, but my undergrad and my master's and my doctorate are all in OT, and it just kind of limits you. Yeah, deep dive. And I'm truly an OT, But I think it's really cool. Some people are PTs and OTs. They go back and do both or whatever. And so I do think it brings a special kind of thing to your work when you have that. And I do want this podcast to be for multidisciplinary professions. So just tell us a little bit about that, and then we'll dive into talking about your business and helping you with whatever you need help with. So
that sounds great. So here in Ontario, OT is one of 6 regulated health professions that is allowed to practice the controlled active psychotherapy. And
interesting.
So other professions are, social work, nursing. I would have to pull this up. Psychotherapists, obviously.
Yeah.
So my kind of career progression was I got my undergrad in biology, my master's in OT. I worked in like just straight up OT for years. And then as I transitioned more and more into pediatrics, so initially I worked in adult OT. And then as I transitioned into pediatrics, I learned that the thing that I actually really loved was supporting around the mental health piece. I really loved supporting around anxiety, emotional regulation. And so I started taking some courses, and then this shift came in our policies, I want to say 5 years ago-ish.
Recent.
Yeah, really recent. And so with that, with our college doesn't define it super clearly, with enough continuing education, in
Hmm.
the field of psychotherapy, and then with ongoing supervision. So that's the other thing that we have to do is
Yeah.
we have a psychotherapy supervisor. But with all of that, I'm able to practice as both an OT and a psychotherapist, which is
Okay.
really cool because I think it offers this really unique lens, right? Where we can do a deeper dive into the mental health piece specifically, but then also
Yeah.
take the holistic lens that we naturally take as OTs.
Yeah. And OT, I feel like there are so many things I want to say here. So I know this is supposed to be a live coaching call to help you. I didn't really say that at the beginning, but like this is valuable, I think, for people to hear this conversation. So yesterday I had a call with one of the authors of this book, Nature-Based
Yes.
Therapy,
Yeah.
which people love. And this is like one of my favorite all-time books about nature-based therapy and pediatrics. And basically, Catherine Rose is the clinical director, and then the other woman, Bonnie, is the director of supervision. That's not the right title, but basically they run a very large mental health organization called Human Nature Counseling. I'm going to get it wrong. I'm sorry, y'all, if you're listening. Um, but I want to mention it here because if people are mental health therapists, they offer a significant training. It's like multiple levels and like loads of hours of supervision. You can only get quote unquote certified through them. We had a discussion about certifying people to do nature-based work and how kind of like anyone can do this work. And also we want to be evidence-based
Right.
and be well trained to do it. So but there is a thoughtfulness around that because nature belongs to everyone and nature doesn't really
Yes.
belong to any of us at the same
Yes.
time, you know? So
Totally.
it's this interesting kind of conundrum when we're saying we're certifying people. So we had this really great discussion around that. But the reason I bring it up is because we were talking kind of about what I do as an OT and how I support like allied health professionals and mental health. That we have had some clinical social workers come through the Contigo approach course that I teach. And so anyway, we were talking about our programs and they do not certify people outside of the mental health kind of umbrella. And it got us into a conversation about how OT actually started in the as a mental health
Yeah, that's
like
right.
profession, you know?
Yeah.
And so somehow we've gotten away from this and we have this, I mean, I remember this in my PhD program having to learn the whole history again of OT and how we got away from that and went into this medical model trying to like quote unquote validate who we are in some
Right.
way. And I think in some ways it has led to a total loss of our identity as a profession because we've lost those ties to the mental health piece. So
Mhm.
to me, what you are sharing about the laws in Canada, including OT, as someone who can become a licensed, you know, I don't know if you call it licensed there, psycho
Registered. Yeah, registered.
registered
Yeah.
psychotherapist, like
Yeah.
that is very interesting. And I hope that in the US and worldwide, we will start to kind of move in that direction more in the OT profession because at least in the US, it is very much a separate, it's very separate. It's like
Right.
you couldn't become a psychotherapist. I'd have to go back to school for another 2 years and probably loads of interning and supervision, as they say, after that to call myself a psychotherapist in the United States. So good discussion for us to have on the podcast for people to understand differences in, you know, where you live and the titles you use and all those kinds of things. So yeah,
Cool.
you might want to look into their leveled training. It's very significant. It's like a lot of hours and supervision and stuff like that
Yeah.
that they take people through. So,
Cool.
but had you heard of them before?
Oh, I've read their
Human
book.
Yeah, you've read
Yeah.
the book. Yeah,
Yeah.
yes.
But I
That's
haven't
like
heard of that specific business.
yeah, it's
You said human nature?
human it's not on here. They must have just started it last year. I'm gonna look it up so that
Okay.
we actually can say it on the podcast because I humannaturecounseling.ca, counseling with 2
Oh,
L's
and they're Canadian.
is their website. Yeah, yeah, yeah. They're a Canadian. Did I not say that? Sorry. Yes, they're a Canadian organization.
Cool.
So interesting because our discussion, you know, they were saying, well, we don't certify OTs because we focus on the mental health professionals.
Mhm.
But I wonder too if there's some, you know, some overlap if you have done the
That's right.
training like you have as a
Yeah.
psychotherapist,
Yeah.
it because you have that background, right? Because the things I looked that they cover in their training are very different than what I teach in the Contigo program. Or, I mean, there's a lot of alignment, but there's a lot of very psychotherapy-ish stuff.
Gotcha.
So, which is appropriate when you are a psychotherapist,
Psychotherapist,
mental
yes.
health counselor, right?
Yeah, totally.
So, anyways, let's talk about your business. So, I
Okay.
know what you had kind of written on your form when you filled it out to schedule this call, but share with the listeners, like, where are you at right now, and what do
Yeah.
you really want help on in your business? Knowing that, so I often tell people we're not going to fix everything or solve everything in a 30-minute call, right? But one way to think about it is thinking about, like, in your ideal world, what are your dreams for the business in the next 3 to 5 years or
Yeah.
so? And then we'll kind of take it from there. So tell us where you're at and what you're
Okay.
hoping for.
So this is coming at a really interesting time because I'm in a very active phase of growth, which is something that I've really resisted for a very long time. So I think my business, I've had a wait list since 2021. Like, my business has been ready to grow long before I was ready to grow. But this year, I recently hit a point where, specifically with Kids in the Woods, actually, so it's this, Kids in the Woods is the part of my business where we run these nature-based groups. And also I've been doing some nature-based one-on-ones. And it's something that I feel like it's my baby. Like, I've nurtured this program into the world. I'm so proud of it. And I'm so proud of how effective and supportive it is for the families in our community. And I'm also hitting a point where I'm ready to not be doing all of the groups. And so me hitting that point kind of aligned with running into a therapist who is super passionate about nature-based OT. And so I kind of threw it out there saying, would you ever be interested in helping me with some of this? And she was like, absolutely. And then just a couple of weeks ago, another therapist who's super interested in helping with the nature-based work specifically is like signing on, joining the team. So I've gone from it being just me to now me and 2 OTs and an OT assistant. Okay. So it's like blooming and growing, which is beautiful. And the piece that I'm really hoping for some support around is what it looks like to be a good leader to a team. So I have found, in my experience, I've worked in lots of different places in healthcare, and I have not had many good examples of leadership. And it's really important to me that people on my team feel supported and that they want to be there. Like, I really want to grow a team. I want to grow a good team. Yeah. Maybe that's it in a nutshell. Yeah, I want this to be a team where people want to be there, that nurtures their interests and their passions, but also nurtures the business. I don't know what that looks like.
So being a good leader, that is a really big topic. So let me ask you, to get an idea of the team, how much are these people working in your business?
Good question. So one right now is just doing 1 day a week. She also works for another OT company in my town. And so she's, trying to figure out how to make that time work. So 1 day a week with me. And then the other OT who's coming on is starting at 0.5, and she hopes to build up to full time.
Okay, that's great. So the first thing that comes to mind, like the biggest lesson I learned when I first hired, was that the more time you can give people, the more hours you can give them, the more invested they are in your business. And that sounds completely logical, but I did not know that when I started. And I had a lot of people who were working full-time jobs and just working like a couple hours a week for me. And you can't grow a business that way. There's just not energy or time to give to your business. And it's not that they weren't amazing employees and doing a really great job. It's just, we're human and we don't have time if most of our time is spent on another job. So I usually recommend to people to try to hire for as many hours as you can, rather than hire a team where you have 3 people that are all working kind of part-time.
Yeah.
Now, sometimes you have to do that because
that's how it goes.
With the nature of our work, like most of the hours are like after school hours. And so a full-time position can't even, we've had trouble with my full-time employee even figuring out what her caseload could look like if she doesn't work the Saturday groups, because we know we can always fill Saturday groups. We always have a wait list for them.
Yeah.
And so in some ways I have told her, this is something else that might help you, Shannon, so you don't make the same mistakes I did. Okay. That's the whole purpose of these calls. Let's just show all of Laura's mistakes so that other people don't have to make them. That's basically what I pull from when I'm coaching people. But it's true. It is true. I've made a lot of mistakes and I have learned from them. And I think one thing that's been hard for me is I really try to go above and beyond to make sure people like their jobs and promise things that, or tell people that I really want them to love their job. And so I want them to tell me what they want, when they want to work, when they want to do this, this, and this. And at some point, part of being a good leader is to like have really clear expectations. And it's been really hard for me because, like with this full-time employee who we hired her and she was working these two groups on Saturdays. And one of the things that has come up in our one-on-one discussions about how can we make her job better and what would she really love is that she doesn't want to work on Saturdays, but that's a big day to fill in because you can get daytime hours, right? So in some ways I went back to her and I was like, well, I think the reality in this business is that if we have a full-time role, that person is going to be expected to work on Saturdays,
Right.
But that's really hard to do when you've told someone you want to make sure that they can, love their job and that you're going to do everything you can within reason to like help them really love their work. It's really hard to feel like you have to kind of set boundaries in that way. So I guess what I'm saying is I don't know that I'm a great leader to model yourself after, but what I have learned in leading a team is that it can be very challenging to balance the needs of the business and our hearts as therapists and as people because we care about the people that we hire. And I would encourage you to always keep the needs of the business in mind because ultimately that's your responsibility as the business owner is to make sure that your business exists 5-10 years later to serve more people, right? And your business won't exist if you don't keep the needs of the business in mind and you're just trying to scramble around doing what everybody wants you to do. If you're a typical therapist, like most of us are, who want to please everyone that we interact with and that we work with, right? So I don't know, thoughts on that? Or do are there specific questions that came up as I was pontificating there?
No, even as you were describing that, I can already think of an example of how I did lead with my heart, right?
Yeah.
And it really is that sense of I really want you to want to be here. I want to nurture you as a therapist. Really, yeah, like you said, I really genuinely want the best for them. And already in a short time, there's already been a situation where I was like, probably shouldn't have done that. That probably wasn't the route I should have gone. So I guess there's no short answer to this, but finding that balance between being heart-centered, right? Like genuinely caring about your staff and also like being thoughtful and mindful about the needs of the business and trying to find a balance between those two things.
I think having like when you establish expectations or job descriptions or kind of the policies and procedures around hiring, right? When you establish those things, I would definitely recommend that in any policy or procedure that you share with them or that you set up, for example, like bonus structures, like we had a bonus, we still do have a bonus structure in my business. When I originally set up a bonus structure, that was one of those things where I felt like, well, now I've done it, I can't ever take it back. And it's like, no, actually you can take it back. You're allowed to do that as the business owner. And you also have to be prepared to know that if that makes people so mad that they leave, then you have to be prepared to do that. Now, realistically, that wouldn't be the only thing that would make someone leave their job, like a little $200 bonus or something, but it's things like that. Like I would recommend if you make those policies that you basically tell the employees that these are going to be reviewed on a yearly basis and they're not always a guarantee, right? But the hard thing is with human psychology, it's like once you have something, right? It feels like you're losing something if you have to give it up.
Yeah.
So be very thoughtful about any policy or procedure that you put in place that makes the business less financially stable, I guess, or less profitable, because I am all for like highly rewarding employees for the work they do. And if you want to go down this route, there's a lot we could talk about as far as like compensation wise, like keeping people happy, but also keeping the needs of the business in mind. There are lots of different opinions on that with different coaches and strategists and stuff. But I do think that's part of the challenge is establishing policies and knowing that you as the business owner are allowed to change those in the future if you need to. And keeping that kind of confidence in yourself to make those decisions as the business grows. So
as you're describing it, it gives me this sense of like stepping back and thoughtfully creating these policies almost creates a container,
Yeah.
and then within the boundaries of those policies, that's where I can be heart led, you know.
Yeah. Totally.
But that still creates like a buffer, I guess, for all of us. It's that like Brene Brown
Exactly.
idea of like clear is kind, right? Like this
Yes.
still it makes sure that things are really clear. I guess something I'm curious about is like, yeah, what kind of like, so you talked about like bonus structures, like what other kind of like what
Mhm.
policies do you think would be really helpful?
Yeah. So let's talk about this. I'm thinking of your original question of
Mm,
like being a good leader. And this is something kind of like when you're saying what policies would be helpful, I'm sort of thinking too about what policies or procedures or things are in general are helpful for helping a team feel like they have a good leader or helping a team
yes.
feel cohesive, right?
Yeah.
One thing that comes to mind is transparency around pay structure. And that is something that I initially, when I started, I wasn't transparent about like this, this is the pay structure. Like you start here and every year you get this and there's a performance review or whatever. So I think having clarity around that. Now I do still have full control over that. And it is not like every person in the business knows what every other person makes
Right.
because I'm allowed, and I wrote that into the policy because I'd already learned the lesson about maintaining my ability to make decisions without having to ask everyone, because
Yeah.
this is not a cooperative. This is a business that I own. But I wrote into the pay structure when I made it transparent and I made a pay structure document that everyone had access to with the bonuses on it and all the benefits and everything. I basically put a stipulation in there that, Laura reserves the right to offer when we have hard to fill positions to offer more money to people, essentially. That's the reality of needing to staff in your business. And that's an example of like needing to keep the needs of the business in mind, right? So I think pay transparency around like what the general structure is for pay, I think allows employees to kind of feel a sense of camaraderie and like there's no secrecy about like who's being paid what in the business because
Right.
everybody kind of knows if you have this much experience, people know that like the person in my practice who has 22 years of experience as
Hmm.
an OT is probably getting paid at the top of the pay scale,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
People know the lead therapist gets a $500 bonus every semester for the extra admin work she does or whatever. There's like little things like that for every year. I can't remember what it is off the top of my head. I joke now, like my business is big enough. My business is still so small compared to like Amazon, but the business is big enough now that like everybody has their jobs and I don't know what's going. There's a lot of things that I'm like, yeah, we have that policy, but with everything else going on, I don't remember. I'd have to like literally pull up the policy to look
Right.
at it. So it's good to write things down. So transparency around pay. I also think having some way for everybody to ongoing communicate. We use
Yeah.
WhatsApp in my business. I don't know if there's a different app that people could use, Voxer or whatever. I've heard good things about Marco Polo too. I don't really know the ins and outs of all of those, but WhatsApp works great for us just for like ongoing kind of communication. And I think that helps people feel connected. And you have
Mm.
like a remote kind of team where people are working on different days
Yeah,
and
because
things
that's
like
something
that.
else I'm thinking. Yeah, that's the thing with nature-based work, right? Is it's not like we're all in a clinic together where we can
Totally.
touch base as we're coming and going.
Yes.
Yeah.
So that WhatsApp is really, really important. And we have like different threads on that too. So I communicate with my admin team, but then there's also like a group that has admin and all the therapists on it and me. And then we're all together. And then the therapists have like a therapist only group where if they're like really mad at me, they can go and vent. I'm just kidding. I don't think they actually do that. But they have like their own thread, can kind of talk about cases or whatever that
Yeah.
maybe don't need to be looked at by me or the admin assistants that we have in the business. Other things I would say are like I try to do at least twice a year. And again, I have a very remote team because I live 2,500 miles away from where my main team is, right? And then I
Mhm.
have a team member here. But at least twice a year, I try to get everyone in the California branch where we have most of our employees. We try to do something special. Like when I was back in town, I just took them out to dinner. It wasn't a huge thing, right? I did pay them for that time because we did end up talking about some things related to the business.
Mhm.
So that's another have really clear expectations, right? If you're going
Right.
to do an event like that, like we're going to have a team dinner, well, are they being paid to come to that, their hourly rate, or are they just, is the dinner the payment? Is it supposed
Right.
to be a social event and be fun? Because I was kind of surprised afterwards because I had an employee on the WhatsApp thread say, are we supposed to put last night's dinner time on our time card? And I was like, are you? I don't know. And then I was like, well, we did talk about business stuff about our groups and things during, I hadn't intended that to happen. It just kind of did. And so I was like, yes, we did do work while we were there. So please put that on your time card. But also that then cost the business. That was like $1,000 meal, because I
Yeah.
paid all the employees, I paid for everybody's meal. You have to think about things like that before you kind of do these fun events. But fun things, I think, for people are really important as far as like being part of a team, like doing nature-based stuff. You guys could like gather at a park one day and practice whittling skills or practice
Totally.
fire building or whatever. My team in California has done that. They've gathered to kind of do an outdoor staff meeting in person. Everybody lives really far away from each other. So it's not like they all live really close and can just get together frequently. So it's still pretty rare, even when I'm not in town, that they get together and do stuff like that. But those type of things I think are equally as important as like the rewarding people financially for, paying them well and things like that. I have found that with bonuses, people don't really even notice that they're going on their paycheck. And then I'm like, well, why did the business just spend several $1,000s if nobody noticed and cared, right? So building that structure around if you are going to do some sort of financial thing, making sure that people know that they're getting it. Like, even if it's just like Nicole and I worked out, I think we're going to just send a text like, congrats, you just got a bonus on your paycheck of $400 or whatever. So just doing a really good job with making people aware of the benefits they are getting if you are going to do some sort of bonus structure. I know that kind of went weird, but what I was trying to say was the financial incentives are important, but I have also found that therapists sometimes want more of the personal connection stuff, and
Totally.
that's just as important to them as
Yeah.
like getting paid for their time that they're spending.
Yeah. And I can relate to that just personally. There was I used to work at a clinic, and it was very much like it was all independent contractors. And so it was very much we were all coming and going because you only got paid for the time you were seeing clients. And so there wasn't a lot of time to really connect with the people in the building. And I neared a point where I was this close to leaving, and then they hosted a team dinner. And at this team dinner, I was like, gosh, these people are amazing,
Yeah.
and that kept me around. Like that kept me around
Great
for another.
example. Great example. Other policies and procedures. I feel like having people, there's also a balance when you're at your stage of letting the employees into the process and
Yeah,
letting them into the process of you making decisions in the business, while at the same time maintaining your autonomy as the owner of the business. And
so
I'm really
yes, this is very much my challenge because truly
okay.
what I hope for is people who can come alongside me and like really contribute to growing
Yeah.
this program,
Yeah.
specifically the nature-based work, right? That's what I want. And also, I'm recognizing that, yeah, there needs to be limits to that too. And
Yeah.
I guess trial and error is how I figured that out. But
Yeah. Well, I think also too, just remembering when you communicate with them about things like valuing their feedback and using language that does not imply that they will get to make the final decision, because
right,
ultimately that's your decision,
right,
right? Framing things like, I would love the team's feedback before I make this decision for the
right,
business, something like that. It's like, I want your feedback, and we're all going to talk about what our feelings are about this certain procedure that we're going to implement, or the intake process or the assessment process or whatever. A lot of times it's related to like service delivery, right?
yeah,
When they're
yeah,
when they're talking with us about things. And I do feel like just now, I mean, I'm in my 9th year of running the business, and I feel like just now we really are to a place where people do feel like they can give us feedback. That's why the staff meeting at the dinner kind of became like this, let's talk about, well, we were thinking about trial visits, but could we do trial visits, and what would that look like, and what if we did this for the older kids, like we just kind of started talking about all these things. And it was I felt very comfortable doing it with them, because we've had enough conversations in our staff meetings where we're kind of talking through these things, and then I will take all their feedback into consideration and make a decision.
Mm-hmm.
And it's almost just as much about being heard, more so than it is than about the actual final decision. If people are heard and they know that their input was valued and received and thought through before the decision was made, I think it really goes a long way towards them accepting if the decision wasn't exactly what they wanted it to be. So
hearing a lot about communication, just the importance of really clear, thoughtful communication.
Yes, which you clearly are good at. You really are. You're able to articulate your thoughts really clearly, and you can talk about your business really clearly, even just in this conversation, right? So I feel like you are well set up to do this. A, a reference that I should show you is this. Have you heard me talk about this book before? I'm just pulling books off my shelves today. Traction.
No.
Have you heard me talk about this?
No.
Okay, so this is the book that I recommend for all business owners in general, but nature-based business owners when you're hiring a team. Okay, so Traction, Get a Grip on Your Business by Gino Wickman.
Okay.
Wickman. And he basically, it's a little bit overwhelming. Okay. It's not for a brand new business owner. I would never tell someone to read this book if they had just started their practice. It is way too overwhelming. It is perfect for someone who is in your stage right now where you are hiring a team, you're starting to manage people, because there's a lot in it about like the procedure we use in my practice for our staff meetings. We have it all like basically timed out. It's 5 minutes for this, 5 minutes for this, 10 minutes for this, 20 minutes for this, 5 minutes for this, and then like an hour for the problem solving, kind of like talking about ideas and discussing things, like those things we need to make decisions on. And so the framework for that came out of this book, and we modified it a little bit because we felt like it was a little, not everything, a lot of the stuff you're going to read in business books doesn't work for like a therapy practice, especially a nature-based practice. There's a lot of like things that didn't fit in this book too, but I do feel like it's huge. This book is huge on getting systems in place in order to manage a team and grow a business. That's like for the growth stage, it's a really good book. So that's one I would highly recommend. I did a mastermind a few years ago with a really, really small group business coaching program with 6 people, I think were in it. And we went through this, and I created all of these like cheat sheets for them, which are now in my business coaching program now, the Hive, because it can be a lot to get through the book, but there's just these key concepts that are very important in there that will help you manage and grow a team. I think it's a really good resource.
Amazing. Thank you.
Yeah. What else? What else is top of mind? Do you feel like we got a few things rolling for you in your brain, like some gears turning?
Yeah. Yeah, I think so. I think too, I get really in my head about what it should look like and how hard it's going to be to get there, But one of the things that I think I'm taking away from this conversation is that like keeping the focus on, like, really it's the basics, isn't it? Like keeping the focus on systems, policies, communication.
Yeah.
And like those are things I can do.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And you can only do the next thing.
Yeah.
At any given point in time in your business. You can only do the very next thing in front of you. That's kind of how you grow a business, is like, what's the next thing I can do today to get me towards whatever the goal is, right? So there's a lot in this book too, in the Traction book, about like setting quarterly goals, having vision for the whole team to know what the goal is for that year, what the goals are for that quarter, which I think will kind of help you as a business owner too, to know so when I said, what's the next step, I immediately thought towards the quarterly goal, but I realized I hadn't talked about that yet. That's why I mentioned, but it's like, what are your main few goals for that quarter, for that 3-month time period?
Yeah.
And the whole team is working on all of those together. And it really forces you as the business owner to know what you're supposed to be working on too. Like mine are on my wall right here. I often on calls will be like looking to the right at my wall because I have Q2 goals: hire for Wisconsin, employee step ladder, template for monthly newsletter for OKOT, and update Trello board and training manual for fieldwork students. So I know exactly, like, those are the 4 things that I have to focus on for these 12 weeks before the end of June in order to like get those systems in place in my business. And yours will look totally different. And any businesses is going to look totally different because it's whatever you have to do as the owner in your business. And there's probably like a million other things, like this stack of tax stuff on my desk right now. And like all the other things get done at some point. But
it's one of the things though that I think is going to be really nice about having people working with me is that it's going to free up a little bit of my time so that I can do that higher level thinking and planning. And B, it's going to give me some accountability so that I need to do that higher level thinking and planning because they need to plan their lives too, you know?
Yes.
Yeah. So that's a good reminder too, to look back. I found the pandemic really beat planning out of me. Because every time I made a plan, I couldn't follow through on it, which was just like a really
blown up.
Yeah, it did. It was a really like demoralizing experience.
Right.
But obviously that's not the time that we're in. And so for me to circle back and maybe put a focus there.
Yeah, I think that's something too, as you said that I want to wrap us up, but I just want to say this too. Like so much to say about teams because it's just a lot, right?
Mm-hmm.
A lot of times the planning with a team has to be done like way farther in advance than you think it needs to be done. And so helping the team see that you really are not trying to be annoying by asking them in January to let you know their schedule, what they want to work next year in September.
Yeah.
You're not trying to be annoying. You just literally legitimately have to know so that you can map out all the services, launch the registration, get the families enrolled, make sure that you have staffing, all of that. So it's like you're working constantly like a year ahead of time. And Nicole has really helped me with this. I'm a very like fly by the seat of my pants, like just like I said, do the next thing and it'll all get done eventually, right? Not necessarily, I guess maybe I'm taking back what I said a little bit, but they talk in this traction book about how like the owner of a business is often a visionary and they want to do all the things and they really need a partner or someone who's what they call an integrator who can like take it all and like be like, no, pause. We need to get systems around this, or no, we shouldn't do that crazy idea you have because we are doing this right now. Remember, you know, like she's very nice about it. She's not mean how I just sounded, but she's really helped me because she really does like help me think through all the systems, everything that has to happen in the business. And she has been really good at getting me to think through, like, we need to think a year ahead of time. So like right now we are planning for registration. We've opened registration for fall. We've filled camp. And now she's already like, do you think next year we could open registration in February for both camp and the fall at the same time? I mean, she's thinking in February next year right now, you know? So that's what you have to be doing as the owner and as the manager of the business. I mean, she calls herself my executive assistant, which is so
I love that.
You know, like she's like, that's what I do for you. And I'm like, I know, but I just feel weird. Like, I don't feel like I'm an executive, you know, but she's also very much in my mind, like operations, like she's an operations manager, doesn't even really do it justice. It's like operations and systems development manager. I don't know. I could think up some crazy good title for her if I had time, but for Outdoor Kids OT, because she really is the one thinking like, okay, long term, how are we putting all these systems in place, having the reminders pop up when we need them inside of our project management software, and you know, just kind of making sure that the business is thinking ahead all the time. And employees often, they don't know that back end of the business. Your employees are never going to understand like how much work it takes.
Oh, it's so much work
to run the business, right?
Especially I find with group-based work.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. We could do a whole other, I mean, it could be a whole other hour, right? To talk about the logistics around groups and how forming them and staffing them and all of that. I mean, it is so much time and energy.
Yeah.
And I would definitely have your team help you with that. So that is something in my practice that we do. We have the therapist help with forming those groups. They review applications and I've kind of helped them know how to kind of think through it. And once you start to do the work, you can kind of know what to look for on the applications, and they've given feedback on what else we need to put on the applications and what other information they want to have, right?
Yeah.
To help them place kids appropriately in groups. So your team can actually really help with offloading some of the stress of the managing the logistics stuff too, because I
Yeah.
know it's a lot. My business does mostly groups. We do some individual, but it's mostly groups.
Yeah,
So
which is like a cool way to offer therapy. I think it's so wonderful. And
Mhm.
also administratively, it's a lot.
Yes, it
Yeah,
is. It is a lot. And I think people don't realize
totally.
the systems that you need to have around that. Last thing I was going to say that I really think it's important, especially for people at your phase of business, to I think what's hard as a leader in your own practice, right, is that no matter what you do, you are always going to be other than
Yeah,
to the people in your practice, right? Like
right,
you can be the most heart-centered, the most loving, the most caring, and they still are going to see you as the owner or the
right.
boss, right?
Yeah,
And so I think it's really important for people in our stage of business who are managing teams to have friends or colleagues or communities that we are part of where we are with other business owners who can understand how we feel and who can kind of normalize that process for us. And it doesn't mean that you don't love your employees or that you don't have great relationships with them, but
yeah,
it is just it's a different thing. You need a community of people who you can go to and be like, can you believe what this employee asked me for? Or
totally,
whatever,
totally. Yeah,
like they work 3 hours a week and they want $1,000 for continuing ed every year, or whatever, like just things like that come
yeah,
up that you can just then have a safe place to be like, tell me I'm not crazy. And people can be like, you're not crazy.
yeah.
I just really encourage you to find, even if it's just one other person that you're friends with that you're like, okay, can I just vent for a minute? Because it's really important to have that pressure valve release, I think, as a
Yes.
business owner.
Yeah.
So,
And it's a good reflection or a good reminder too that very much I want to support my team and their well-being.
Mhm.
And also I need to support my well-being.
Yes. 100%. Okay, so download for me what your takeaways are from today. Like just tell me, but I'm really big on, I think a lot of times we think we know something and if we don't, this is how my son learns in homeschooling. This is part of Charlotte Mason education for anyone who's interested. Charlotte Mason is like the most amazing homeschooling methodology, like incredible. I am such a fan. It is influencing even how I see the Contigo approach. I feel like I need to put new modules in the program because of it. But one of the things that is really big at it is narration. It's like telling back.
Hmm.
Really big about you. I don't think you really internalize or know something until you reflect on it and tell it back.
Totally.
So we're going to do a little tell back here.
Yeah.
So what are your takeaways?
Yeah. So my takeaways are being a good leader means really clear and thoughtful communication. It means building a sense of connection amongst the team. So, it doesn't have to all be me, but I can facilitate that
Great.
connection amongst my team. I'm taking away that I can value my team's feedback and still make it clear that like I will absolutely consider it and ultimately the decisions need to be mine. And I'm taking away that like I need to refocus on setting quarterly and annual goals to support the business growth, but to support the team too.
Yeah. And get everyone kind of headed the same direction. That's
Yeah.
awesome.
Yeah.
I think those are great takeaways. That was a very good narration, Shannon.
Well, thank you.
A telling back of what we discussed.
It's so funny. So I've done training and coaching because I do a lot of parent coaching in my business too. And that's one of the big things that they teach as well, that at the end, it's really important with your coaching clients to ask them to tell you their takeaways. You should never be writing them down for them. Like, yeah, that it's like this process of integrating the information in a meaningful way.
Yes. See, it works, right? I mean, I have been blown away by the content that my 13-year-old can read and tell back to me. And I'm reading the book with him. And I don't know if I could tell back as well as he does because he's trained his brain to do it. And I just really feel like that's how I force myself to really deeply learn and understand things is by teaching them to people. It's why I do stuff on social media or like teach on the podcast because I feel like it helps me kind of integrate it into my learning when I have to teach it because you have to organize your thoughts in some coherent way.
Totally.
So, well, thank you so much. This was so great. We went a little bit long, but I think it was like super helpful to people. And I just know a lot of people are going to be helped by this because you were just so thoughtful in the things you brought and your reflection on everything. So thanks for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. It was so lovely.
Thanks for joining me today for Therapy in the Great Outdoors. If you want valuable advice as you start or grow your nature-based pediatric practice, get my free ebook, The Nature-Based Practice Roadmap. It is a guide to help you focus and avoid costly mistakes as you start or grow your outdoor work with children. In it, I share the 4 stages of nature-based practice, what you need to focus on and common mistakes to avoid in each stage, plus a checklist of specific action steps for you to take at each stage in the process. Get it at therapyinthegreatoutdoors.com/roadmap. So until next time, get outside, connect, reflect, and enjoy therapy in the great outdoors.